Hello friends, it's Goobs here. I've been seeing a few questions about the Gunlancer and maybe how to utilize certain aspects of your kit. So in this tips and tricks video, I'm hoping to clear up some confusion about how to actually maximize your kit. As always, if you find this content helpful, please consider liking and subscribing for more Gunlancer and Lost Ark content in the future. Thanks everyone. The first thing I see whenever people talk about Gunlancer is how they have a backwards dash. While this is indeed awkward initially, trust me when I say that this dash is actually one of the strongest dashes in the game. Because of its short cooldown, the Gunlancer actually feels pretty nimble with this backdash. The only downside is that you can't actually avoid some attacks, especially if the boss has an area of effect around them, but if it's a conal attack, it's very easy for the Gunlancer to just backstep out of. The other thing about the Gunlancer dodge is that it actually gives you on-demand crowd control. Like that, if I dodge as the attack is coming in, then I won't get knocked down or crowd controlled. So let's see if I can line this up again. Like that. That attack would normally cause me to be stunned in place, but because I'm dashing at the right moment, I become immune to it. Another reason why this backdash is really good is because the Gunlancer has a few attacks which actually push you backwards on cast. So like for example, Surge Cannon, it'll knock you backwards slowly. And at this point, I'm out of range. So what you can actually do is as I'm channeling Surge Cannon, you can just backstep back in and you're right in the face of the boss. And again, because this backstep is a very short cooldown, it really helps you stick to the boss and consistently deal your damage. Your defensive stance and the shield meter which powers it is going to be one of the most important resources to manage. So how do we actually generate shield meter? Well, almost every attack available to the Gunlancer will generate at least a very little bit of this shield meter. So this goes for your just auto attacks. You can see it slowly going up here, but the blue attacks will actually generate a lot more. So if I actually apply no cooldowns here, you'll see that my bash is going to continuously just build up a little bit more meter than if I were to just spam fire bullet. One bash is the equivalent of like 2, maybe 3 fire bullets. By default, this is going to mean that your blue Gunlancer is just going to generate a lot more of the shield meter because you're just simply using more blue skills. We do have a skill that actually supplements the shield meter generation, and that's with specialization. This kind of goes into another reason why blue Gunlancer is just a little bit tankier, and that's because they stack specialization, whereas the red build does not. But let's talk about some of the most important meter generation skills, and there are 2 of them. The first is Shout of Hatred, and the second is your first awakening skill. For Shout of Hatred, if you're taking this 3rd tier tripod open weakness, it actually automatically causes you to generate 20% of your maximum shield meter. So right away, if you see here, it's going to give me a giant burst if I hit a target. So just by casting that once, you see that giant chunk. That's very important to use on cooldown. Well, maybe not necessarily on cooldown, but it'll provide you with a chunk of shield meter on demand. The Shout of Hatred meter generation also benefits from specialization. So in this build, I have only 21 specialization, and it's going to take me about 5 Shout of Hatreds to get full shield meter here. But if I switch to a build with a little bit more specialization, in this case I have 466, it's going to take me only 3 Shout of Hatreds to get up to my maximum shield meter. As for your awakening skill, you will instantly generate 100% of your shield meter as soon as you cast it. So this is a great option to start off any fight, and you can even use it before the fight actually begins to just, go into the fight with full resources. One very important note I want to call out is that if you're in your shield state, you do not actually generate any kind of shield meter. This is a very common mistake made by Gunlancers, and it's going to get you in trouble if you're not aware of it. So basically take note that anytime you're about to use your Shout of Hatred, make sure that you're dropping your shield beforehand. Alright, so we talked about how to generate shield meter, but now how should we be actually spending that meter on our shield? I'm going to break down a few important times you should be using your shield and when you shouldn't for both red and blue Gunlancers. I'll be listing these as a priority system because it's not really that scripted. But let's start off with the Red Gunlancer because it has the easiest decision making. The most important time you want to use your shield is when you're starting your burst combo. So that starts with a Shout of Hatred, bash into your shield and into a Surge Cannon and your Charge Stinger. Note that it's specifically when you're using your charged stinger and surge cannon that you want to shield. That's just because if you have your shield up when you start with the Shout of Hatred, you're not getting that 20% shield meter, meaning there's a possibility that you're not maximizing your resources. The next time you want to be using your shield is when you're at your maximum shield energy and you need to dump it in preparation for your next taunt cycle. So right now I would be playing extra aggressive, trying to just use up as much meter, not letting it really go to waste. And now that I've used up a chunk of the meter, I'm ready for the next taunt, which I do that now, generating that resource, and we're not wasting anything at this point. The final time you should really be looking to use your shield is if you cannot dodge a boss's big attack. You want to be able to conserve this amount, so if I couldn't get out of this attack, I would just shield it briefly and then take my shield down. This lets you keep generating your shield, and since the red build is a little bit less tanky and doesn't generate as much of that shield meter, you're really just saving your resources and making it go as far as possible so you can keep up with your burst damage and just sticking to the boss. So in summary, for the red build, your highest priority is to use your shield meter during your burst combo to avoid getting interrupted, then to avoid overcapping your resources, and finally, if you really need to absorb damage from a big hit. Otherwise, you really want to try to play like a normal DPS and avoid damage by just running out and dodging mechanics. Blue build has some similar nuances as the red build. One of the biggest mistakes you can make with the blue build though is thinking that you can keep your shield active 100% of the time. This is incorrect because you're hurting your shield resource generation by keeping it up at all times. So similar to the red build, the one time you really want to be activating it is during your burst combo. So that would start with a bash and then into your leap attack and Guardian's Thunderbolt and your shield your shield bash and shield charge. The next time you should be looking to use your shield is once again similar to red, and that's when you're almost at your maximum shield capacity. You want to be able to play a little bit more aggressively in this state because we're just trying to dump some of that meter in preparation for the next Shout of Hatred cycle. And yeah, so we can just play it much more aggressively with just our shield permanently active in this case. And now that it's dropped a little bit, I will drop the shield, Shout of Hatred, and we're back to full. The third time you should be using your shield is when you can take light hits from a boss. The light damage from the boss will not drain much shield meter, and it provides you with a damage buff due to combat readiness. And finally, you should only be taking big hits with your shield if and only if you can't avoid them. It doesn't really make sense to just waste your resources unnecessarily if you can avoid a big hit. In summary, you don't want to keep your shield active at all times. This is going to cause you to have a hard time maintaining your shield resource, which the combat readiness build heavily relies upon. During your downtime, such as when you don't have a bash damage window with Guardian's Thunderbolt and leap attack, you want to leave the shield down so you can spend that period generating resources. Only activate the shield during your burst window to avoid capping resources, to absorb light damage from the boss, or finally as a last resort to avoid big damage. You should be avoiding big damage whenever possible. For the next tip, I want to talk about Shout of Hatred and how the taunt works, because it's a very unique ability available to the Gunlancer and very important. Some bosses have attacks which can and cannot be taunted, so it's important to experiment and see which attacks you can interrupt, because you'll find that some of those more problematic attacks which cause group issues can actually be interrupted, allowing your party to continue to deal damage. It's also important to note that you can't just make a party of Gunlancers and spam taunt. The bosses are going to have a little buff window where they cannot be taunted again. You can track the boss buff under their health, which allows you to better understand when your next taunt window should actually be. The next topic I want to go over are mana issues. Gunlancer has a few skills that cost an exceptional amount of mana. Shout of Hatred and Elagia's Energy both cost around 500 mana each, which is going to consume about a third of your total mana pool if used back to back. So my advice is to use Elagia's Energy conservatively, specifically during attacks with potentially high damage. Don't just use it when it's off cooldown, because this can drain your mana quickly. If you do run out of mana, you'll just have to rely on auto attacks for a few seconds, and luckily the mana regenerates quickly. Just don't be surprised if it actually happens. As a few last thoughts, I would just like to say that the Gunlancer is probably one of the more technical classes to play. You have to track a little bit more of the boss's actions, because Shout of Hatred is a very Very helpful tool in any kind of group play, which you're going to be responsible for simply interrupting a boss and just skipping out on a specific mechanic. Your group is going to rely on you to do that sort of thing. You're also going to be relied upon to use Nalagia's energy to save people, or you can specifically cleanse them. So your raid awareness has to be a little bit higher than some other classes. Our class is also a little bit more resource intensive, and you have to track some things like your shield meter a little bit more closely than, say, something like a paladin, which just has their shield meter passively generate and then they spend it all in one go. We have to constantly toggle our shield on and off to make sure that we're actually managing that resource properly. But once again, this was Goober Troy from Squad Up Games saying thank you all for watching, and remember to squad up and have fun.